The 5th morning of the new year. A gray mist hangs over the Gullet, the narrow throat of water where Blackwater Bay meets the open sea. And out of that mist, on both sides of Dragonstone at once, come the sails. 90 warships, painted galleys of Lees and Mere and Tyrosh, their oars churning the dawn water white, banners of the 3 daughters streaming above the spray. They have crept up from the stepstones in the dark, split into 2 great wings, and now they close like a fist around the island of dragons. And between those closing jaws, a single small cog with a child's name. The gay Abandon runs for the open sea. Aboard her, 2 little princes, half-brothers, the youngest blood of the dragon. Their elder brother sent them this way to keep them safe. He sent them straight into the bloodiest morning the seas of the world have ever known. Welcome to Westeros within, where the fires of history still burn. This is House of the Dragon, the true history, the Battle of the Gullet, the day the realm's golden heir drowned in the surf, and 4 lowborn riders saved a kingdom that never wanted them. To understand the slaughter, you must first understand the hunger. In the last episode, the seeds were sown. Baseborn men and women called to Dragonstone to tame the riderless dragons. But while Rhaenyra gathered her strange new riders, her grandfather-in-law had been waging a quieter war. A war of empty bellies. The sea snake's noose. Lord Corlys Velaryon, the sea snake, the greatest mariner Westeros has ever known, had thrown the largest fleet in the world across the Gullet. Nothing reached King's Landing by sea without his leave. Trade withered, granaries emptied, prices climbed until a sack of flour cost a small fortune. And the city's poor went to bed with their stomachs gnawing at their spines. The capital was being strangled, slowly, patiently, one closed sea lane at a time. And inside the Red Keep, the man who wore the king's confidence searched for an answer. Sir Otto Hightower, the hand of King Aegon II, grandfather of the Greens, a cold, careful old man who had spent a lifetime learning that wars are won as often with ink as with steel. He found his answer across the narrow sea. Otto reached out to the Triarchy, the kingdom of the 3 daughters, the alliance of Lees, Mere, and Tyrosh. These were Corlys Velaryon's old enemies, men who had bled against him and against Daemon Targaryen years before, in the war for the Stepstones. Otto's offer was simple and ruthless: break the blockade, move against the sea snake. And in return, the 3 daughters would have exclusive trading rights at King's Landing, and the Stepstones themselves. The High Council of the 3 daughters met in Tyrosh, and they accepted. Remember this, as the fire spreads and the children burn. Otto Hightower set this in motion with words alone. A stroke of the pen, a clever bargain, a logistics problem solved. He never saw the water choke with the dead. He simply opened the door and let 90 ships sail through it. And here is the cruelty at the heart of this chapter, the thing that turns a battle into a tragedy. The slaughter was triggered by an act of love. Late in the year 129, Prince Jacaerys Velaryon was the master of Dragonstone, Rhaenyra's eldest son, her heir, the heir to the heir, the boy who would one day be king. And Jace, whatever the rumors whispered about his brown hair and his brown eyes, had done everything right. He had flown north and bent the knee of Cregan Stark. He had won the Vale and Lady Jane Arryn. He had gathered the realm's swords for his mother without spilling a drop of Targaryen blood. But Jacaerys had 2 little half-brothers, and he was afraid for them. Prince Aegon the younger, 9 years old, Rhaenyra's son by Daemon, He had a dragon of his own, a small, pale young thing called Stormcloud, scarcely more than a hatchling. Prince Viserys, 7 years old, the baby of the family. He had no dragon at all, only an egg, which he carried like a treasure. Jacaerys decided to send them away from the war, across the narrow sea, to be fostered safely in Pentos, far from dragons and daggers and the slow strangling of the realm. He put them aboard a cog called the Gay Abandon, gave them an escort of Velaryon warships, and pointed their prow toward the free city, the responsible son, sending his baby brothers to safety. He sailed them into the death trap with his own hands, and he would die in the same water, never knowing whether either of them lived. The fleet of the 3 daughters came on the 5th day of the year 130 at sunrise. Their admiral was a man named Sharako Lohar of Lys, not a peacock, not a duelist, a cold, austere professional, a sea commander who spoke in numbers and tides and gave the Dragon Island no warning at all. And his captains were the most dangerous men the Blacks could possibly have faced, because many of them had done this before. These Lysini and Myrish and Tyroshi crews had fought Demon Targaryen and his dragon Caraxes in the Stepstones years earlier. They were not green sailors who would soil themselves at the sight of a wing in the sky. They had aimed at a dragon before. They carried scorpions and crossbows and long spears, grapnels and chains, and they had drilled, they had practiced how to kill a thing of fire from the deck of a ship. The horror of the Gullet is not luck, it is competence. These men came hunting dragons, and they knew the work. And Lohar was clever. He split his 90 ships in 2. One squadron slipped north of Dragonstone, the other south, and they entered the Gullet from both ends at once, at first light, when the Velaryon watch was thin and the morning sea was the color of pewter. The greatest fleet in the world was caught scattered and asleep. By the time the warning horns sounded across the bay, the trap had already shut. The Gay Abandon and her escort sailed into the middle of it, and Prince Jacaerys, watching from Dragonstone, did the only thing a dragon rider could do. He took to the sky on his dragon Vermax, and he flew to save his brothers. For a moment, it seemed the old truth would hold. Vermax fell upon a line of Lysine galleys and bathed them in flame, splitting their oars, setting their decks ablaze. The water lit up gold and orange. The chroniclers tell us that for one breath, an easy victory for the Blacks seemed at hand. Dragons do not lose to wooden ships. Everyone knew that. Then Vermax flew too low. How the dragon was brought down, even the chroniclers cannot agree. And in that disagreement, you can hear the chaos of the morning itself. Too much smoke, too much screaming, too many men who saw only a fragment of the truth. Some say a sailor in the crow's nest of a Myrish galley flung an iron grapnel as Vermax swept past, and a single prong found purchase between 2 scales. The man had coiled the chain about his mast, and so the weight of the whole ship, and the power of the dragon's own wings beating to climb away, tore a long, jagged gash down Vermax's belly. A dragon, hooked like a fish, dragged screaming from the sky by a chain. Others tell it more simply. A crossbow bolt, through the eye, and Vermax fell. We will never know which. We only know the dragon came down, into the burning ships, into the black water, and there he died. Jacaerys leapt free before the crash, and that was the worst thing he could have done, because now the heir to the Iron Throne was in the water, alive, helpless, clinging to a scrap of floating wreckage in a sea full of his enemies. He had no dragon. He had no escape. He had only the surf and the smoke and the galleys closing around him. The Myrish crossbowmen leaned over their rails and took their time. Prince Jacaerys Velaryon was struck by Myrish crossbow quarrels until he sank into the sea, dead. No duel, no song, no dragon against dragon glory in the clouds. The realm's golden heir, the boy who had done everything right, shot like quarry in the surf and swallowed by the black water. His body was never found. No pyre, no tomb, no mother kneeling over a son. Just the sea closing over the future king of the Seven Kingdoms and moving on as if he had never been. And in the very hour the true-born heir drowned, the base-born answered. Just as Vermax fell and disaster loomed over the Blacks, the sky over Dragonstone darkened with wings. The seeds that were sown last chapter came to their first blooding. 4 more dragons fell upon the ships of the 3 daughters, and on their backs rode 4 people the lords of Westeros would never have let near a castle gate. Addam of Hull on Seasmoke, pale silver-gray, lean and quick, the late Laenor's old dragon. A sea-weathered Hull boy with Velaryon blood in his veins, the noblest of the Seeds. Hugh Hammer on Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, the old King Jaehaerys' own mount, the second largest living dragon in all the world. A hulking, dark-haired smith's bastard astride a monster that could blacken a fleet. Ulf the White on Silverwing, good Queen Alysanne's silver-blue she-dragon, ridden now by a white-haired base-born drunkard who had likely never held anything finer than a tankard. And Nettles on Sheepstealer, a thin, brown-skinned, black-haired girl of perhaps 15, on the wild, mud-brown, foul-tempered dragon no one else could ride. The ugliest, fiercest pair on the field, and worth more in that hour than any knight in the realm. The dragon hunters had drilled for 1 dragon, not 5. The Triarchy line broke. 1 galley after another turned away. Painted hulls blossomed into fire. Oil and pitch caught on the surface of the sea itself, and the water burned. Smoke rolled across the dawn until the sunrise looked like dusk. The battle raged on, north and south of Dragonstone, deep into the night, and it remains amongst the bloodiest sea battles in all of history. Hold this in your mind, because it is the engine of the whole episode. In the same hour, Jacaerys Velaryon drowned. The 4 bastards he and his mother had gambled everything on shattered the greatest enemy fleet the Blacks would ever face. The lowborn saved the realm. In the very hour, the true-born heir died for it. But while the dragons burned the fleet, no one was watching the little cog with the children aboard. The gay abandon was taken. Viserys, the 7-year-old, was clever and brave. When the galleys came alongside, he hid his dragon's egg and changed into ragged, salt-stained clothing, pretending to be no more than a common ship's boy. It very nearly worked, but one of the real ship's boys betrayed him, sold him for safety, or for coin, or for simple fear, and he was made a captive. It was a Tyroshi captain who first realized who he had, but the admiral of the fleet, Charako Lohar of Lys, soon relieved him of his prize. A prince of the blood, 7 years old, clutching a dragon's egg under rags, undone by another child. Lohar knew the worth of what he held, and so he did not kill the boy. He kept him, a hostage, carried away across the narrow sea, and in Westeros, his family would believe him dead for years. His brother's fate was different, and somehow worse. Aegon the Younger, 9 years old, escaped on Stormcloud. As the Triarchy fell upon the gay abandon, the boy scrambled onto the back of his little hatchling dragon and flew for Dragonstone. It was the first time Aegon had ever flown. Picture it. A terrified 9-year-old, clinging to the neck of a dragon he had never ridden. fleeing across a burning bay through a sky full of iron. Every scorpion and crossbow on the water turned upward and loosed at the small, pale shape running for home. Stormcloud was hit again, and again, and again. The little dragon reached Dragonstone. He carried his boy to the shore. And then the chroniclers tell us the truth of what that flight cost. That when Stormcloud landed, the stubs of countless arrows were embedded in his belly, and there was a scorpion bolt through his neck. He died within the hour, hissing as the hot blood gushed black and smoking from his wounds. The smallest, weakest dragon of the entire dance saved the future of House Targaryen and died on a cold beach, pierced through, while the boy he had carried watched him go. Aegon the Younger was 9 years old, and he would never fly a dragon again. Not once in all the long years left to him. That morning over the Gullet was his first flight and his last. One brother in chains, lost across the sea. One brother grounded forever. A king-to-be who would never again trust the sky. Both saved only by a small boy's cunning and a runt dragon's dying wings. And even in defeat, the 3 daughters drew their last drop of blood. The southern squadron, beaten on the water, judged Dragonstone too strong to storm, so they turned their fury on a softer target, the sea snake's own home isle of Driftmark. Spicetown, Jacaerys Velaryon's thriving port, the jewel of his trade, raised over a lifetime of voyages, was set ablaze with fire ships. The chroniclers leave us only the aftermath, the bodies of men, women, and children butchered in the streets and left as fodder for gulls and rats and carrion crows. The town burned so completely that it was never rebuilt. It is simply gone from the maps of Westeros, erased in a single night. High tide. The sea snake's gleaming castle of driftwood and dragonglass, his ancestral seat, was put to the torch. All the treasures the sea snake had brought back from the east were consumed by fire, his servants cut down as they tried to flee the flames. The plunder of 9 great voyages across the known world, silks and spices, jade and ivory and gold, the wonders of a lifetime spent sailing where no Westerosi had sailed before. All of it ash by morning. And here is the bitter symmetry of House Velaryon at the Gullet. Corlys held the field. His fleet won the day, and he watched his town slaughtered and his life's treasure burned to nothing, and lost his grandson Jacaerys to the same black water. Yet, in that very battle, his own blood rose into the sky on Seasmoke. Addam of Hull, a Velaryon, made glorious in the same hour the Velaryons were gutted, a victory that tasted in every mouthful of ash. When the smoke finally cleared, the arithmetic was grim, and it favored no one. Of the 90 ships that came up from the stepstones, only 28 limped home. The Velaryons lost nearly a third of the greatest fleet in the world, a wound the sea snake would never fully heal. Thousands of fighting men were dead on both sides. The water choked with wreckage and char. But the warships were not the worst of it. Because the Gullet, that morning, was not only a battlefield, it was a road. A great press of refugee ships had crowded into the strait. Cogs and fishing boats and merchantmen, small folk fleeing the war and the famine, mothers and children, and old men running from a realm on fire. The gay abandon was only one little ship among hundreds. And when 5 dragons dived, and oil and pitch caught light across the surface of the bay, the flames did not stop to ask who was a soldier and who was a child. Thousands of common people burned or drowned in the same fire that won the battle. A prince's grand victory, and a drowned mother and her child. In the same frame, in the same water, in the same hour. This is what the Gullet cost. Not just ships, not just a prince. A sea full of the very people Rhaenyra had sworn to protect. And what did any of it buy? For the Blacks, a stalemate. They held the Gullet. The blockade survived. But they paid for it with their crown prince dead, one boy prince taken and mourned as lost, another prince grounded for life, a third of their fleet gone, and Driftmark in ashes. The first victory of the war that felt, in every bone, like a wound. For the Greens, nothing. The blockade was not broken. King's Landing went on starving. The gates closed against its own desperate people, the slow fuse still burning toward something terrible. And, for the three daughters, ruin. They had bled themselves white in a single dawn, and there was poison in what was left of them. For afterward, men whispered that Sharaco Lohar had spent the ships of Myr and Tyrosh first, like cannon fodder, while sparing his own Lysany. Whether it was true or only the bitterness of widows, the accusation festered. It tore the alliance apart. Within 2 years, the three daughters were at each other's throats in the Daughters' War, and the man who won the Gullet, Sharaco Lohar himself, would be murdered, his victory devouring the very alliance it had served. So this was the Battle of the Gullet, the bloodiest sea battle in the history of the world. And when the fires finally guttered out on the black water, no one had truly won it at all. The responsible son was dead, his body given to the sea. One child was a hostage, thought lost forever. Another would never again trust the air beneath a dragon's wings. And on Dragonstone, a mother who had already buried Lucerys now believed she had lost Jacaerys and little Viserys both. 3 sons gone to this war. With Jacaerys drowned, young Joffrey Velaryon became her heir. And something in Rhaenyra began to change. The grief that had bent her was hardening now into something colder. Something that wanted not justice, but the Iron Throne itself. And the heads of every soul who had kept it from her son. From here, the war stops being fought at the edges of the realm. From here, the fires turn toward the capital, and the road bends, at last, toward King's Landing. I'm Westeros within. If you want to walk that road with us, to the gates of the city, to the throne, and to the realm of flame, subscribe and join me for the next chapter.